Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to. Actually, it's our first installment. So, welcome to our first installment of HWÆT Wednesdays. I'm your intrepid fellow traveler of the Whale Road, Fraggeth, and today we have uh, Beowulf, a new translation by Maria Dahvana Headley. Um, this one's somewhat infamous for some good reasons. Mostly it's people reacting to some of her choices. Oh, wow, I can see we've actually got a bunch of people already today. Awesome. Hello to Warren and Derpy Shark. Thanks for tuning in. So, I know when I was first hearing about it, I was not thrilled. I was like, why? Why are you going to start Beowulf the way you started Beowulf? But then I was like, you know what? I gotta read it myself because why not? I like Beowulf. I think a lot of people like Beowulf. Um, it's I mean, it's a timeless classic, or at least a classic of its time. And doing a radical new translation or adaptation of it uh, could be interesting. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it does. This one I wound up falling in love with because once you kind of get into the vibe that it's going for, it's like, oh, this kind of makes sense. This makes sense because I'm accustomed to the Seamus Heaney and the J.R.R. Tolkien translations. I've got copies of each of those. I've read a few others. Through over the years, but those are the two that I thought were good enough, that I enjoyed enough to keep on my wall. But then this comes around, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty rad. I like so it's been accused of being too colloquialized, too modernized, and you'll know what people mean when they say that when we get there, which we will do pretty much immediately. Um, I will also warn you that I am not going to be overly strict about meter and rhythm. I'm going to try. The book is laid out in such a way and written in such a way that it does make it pretty manageable. It's even got line counts, which helps. There are no chapter breaks, obviously. It's Beowulf. Um, and so we are going to arbitrarily cut it off where I think I've found a decent location here just before the Grendel bits kick in. It's like prep for the Grendel bits, and we'll do the Grendel bits next week, as well as I think we'll get to Grendel's mother. I'm thinking probably we'll do it'll take 3 installments, possibly 4, because I kid you not, a quarter of the book is the introduction, where the translator, um, Maria Dahvana Headley, uh, explains what she was doing. What was she on when she made this? I'm going to save that for the end. So this will maybe be 4 installments, possibly 3. We'll see. She does have an afterword as well, I think. I may wind up just skipping that because it's mostly just acknowledgments, I think. Yeah, the the thing at the end is acknowledgments. I'll safely skip that. Um, but the introduction I do want to do, but I don't want to do it ahead of time because I don't want to prejudice anyone. And to anyone who's actually read or heard or seen an adaptation of Beowulf, I kind of want you to be surprised. Another thing, I'm going to mangle pronunciations. I have gone so far as to get a cheat sheet, but that is no guarantee I'm going to catch these. Um, because in my head, I read them a certain way, which is typically wrong. Um, I happen to know that the name Ecgtheow, which looks like Ecgtheow, is not pronounced that way. It is pronounced something closer to like Edgtheow, 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 something along there. Um, Also, skildings and skeeflings. Skeefings is shieldings and chafings. Geats is gaets, etc. I will guaranteed flub some of the H's because those have different rules. Most of the AEs I'm going to get right because those are all just arf, arf hair, etc. So things are going to be pretty wild. This does get dunked on. People read like the first line and they're like the first like couple lines and they're like, nah, this is an abomination, this is heresy. And I say thee nay. I say thee there's actually method to the madness here. It's actually not bad. Because it's all about let's try and preserve the spirit from the perspective of how it would have been told. One of the ways it would have been told, which is dude at Mead Hall. So update it to basically a bar tale. And with that, um, and some of it's not going to work for you, and that's okay. If you're a purist, this is definitely not going to work for you. But I urge you to listen anyway, just to see how she handles certain things. Yeah, I think I'll call it good there, and get it rolling. You can find some pretty good audio versions covering basically the original text, uh, and it sounds cool, but you're not necessarily going to know it unless you've had to go through some old English courses, which are so long ago for me now. They were part of another course that I can barely remember it. So I'm like digging back, sort of thing. But without further ado, let's get rocking and rolling. Beowulf, a new translation by Maria Dahvana Headley. Bro, tell me we still know how to speak of kings. In the old days, everyone knew what men were. Brave, bold, glory bound. Only stories now, but I'll sound the Spear Dane's song, hoarded for hungry times. Their first father was a foundling, Scyld Chafing. He spent his youth fists up, browbeating every barstool brother, bonfiring his enemies. That man began in the waves, a baby in a basket, but he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom, trading loneliness for luxury. Whether they thought kneeling was necessary or no, everyone from head to tail of the whale road bent down. There's a king. There's his crown. That was a good king. Later, God sent Scyld a son, a wolf cub, further proof of manhood. Being God, he knew how the Spear Danes had suffered, the misery they'd mangled through, leaderless, long years of loss, so the Life Lord, that almighty big boss, birthed them an Earthshaker. Beow's name kissed legions of lips by the time he was half grown, but his own father was still breathing. We all know a boy can't daddy until his daddy's dead. A smart son gives gifts to his father's friends in peacetime. When war woos him, as war will, he'll need those troops to follow the leader. Privilege is the way men prime power, the world over. Scyld was iron until the end. When he died, his warriors executed his final orders. They swaddled their king of rings and did just as the Dane had demanded, back when mind and meter could merge in his mouth. They bore him to the harbor, and into the bosom of a ship. That father they'd followed, that man they'd adored. She was anchored and eager to embark, an ice maiden built to bear the weight of a prince. They laid him by the mast, packed tight in his treasure trove, bright swords, war weeds, his lap holding a hoard of flood tides, each fair coin placed by a loyal man. He who pays the piper calls the tune. His shroud shone, ringed in runes, sun-stitched. I've never heard of any ship so heavy, nor corpse so rich. Scyld came into the world unfavored. His men weighted him as well as the strangers had, who'd once warped him to the waves' weft. Even ghosts must be fitted to fight. The war band flew a golden flag over their main man. The salt sea saluted him, so too the storms, and Scyld's soldiers got drunk instead of crying. They mourned the way men do. No man knows, not me, not you, who hauled Scyld's hoard to shore, but the poor are plentiful, and somebody got lucky. Finally, Beo rolled into righteous rule, daddying for decades after his own daddy died. At last, though, it was his turn for erasure. His son, the half-Dane, ran roughshod, smothering his father's story with his own. He rose in the realm and became a famous warlord, fighting ferociously dawn to dusk, fathering his own horde of 4. Heirs marching into the world in this order: Heorogar, Hrothgar, Halga, and I heard he hand-clasped his daughter, her name's a blur, to Onela. Tender, she rendered that battle Swede happy in fucking, where before he'd only been happy in fighting. War was the wife Hrothgar wed first. Battles won, treasures taken. Admirers and kin heard of his fight fortune and flanked him in force. Strong boys grow into stronger men, and when Hrothgar had an army, his hopes turned to a hall to home them, to a house to espouse his faithful. More than just a mead hall, a world's wonder, eighth of 7. When it was done, he swore he'd load lighten, unhand everything he'd won, worn and owned, pass to his posse all God's gifts, save lives and land. He'd keep the kingdom, of course. He gave far-reaching orders: carpets, carpentry, walls and gables, tables for seating a clan, rare gifts planted like rare meat, all for his men. So it rose, a greater hall than any other. Hrothgar filled it, blood brother by blood brother, and named it Heorot. His words were heard and heralded, and yes, bro, the man was more than just talk. He gave good gifts. His war-wedded wore kings' rings, and drank their leaders' mead. Nightly he feted his fight family with fortunes. The hall loomed, golden towers antler dipped. It was asking for burning, but that hadn't happened yet. You know how it is. Every castle wants invading, and every family has enemies born within it. Old grudges recrudesce. Ooh, ooh. Sorry. The inner me just got very excited at the word recrudesce, which means, and I quote, recrudesce, break out again or recur, which you can, of course, derive from context. Occasionally we like to bang the words out. Ouch. That's right. Clack your foot on that. That's real smart. Alrighty. Speaking of grudges, Out there in the dark, one waited. He listened, holding himself hard to home, but he'd been lonely too long, brotherless, sludge-stranded. Now he heard and endured the din of drinkers. Their poetry poisoned his peace. Every night, turmoil. Raucous laughter from HWÆT, howling of harps, squawking of scops. Men recounting the history of men like them. The Almighty made earth for us, they sang, sun and moon for our delight, fens full of creatures for our feasting, meres to quench our thirst. HWÆT's hull-dwellers caroused by candlelight, stumbling to sleep with the sunrise, replete, lambs bleating comfort, ease pleased, until the night wakefulness moved their watcher to wrath. Grendel was the name of this woe-walker, unlucky, fucked by fate. He'd been living rough for years, ruling the wild. The mere, the fen, the fastness, his kingdom. His creation was cursed under the line of Cain, the kin killer. The Lord long ago had taken Abel's side. Though none of that was Grendel's doing, he'd descended from bloodstains. From Cain had come a cruel kind, seen by some as shadow-stalked. Monsters, elves, giants who'd ground against God, and for that been banished. Under a new moon, Grendel set out to see what horde haunted this hall. He found the ring-danes drunk, dowsed down, making beds of benches. They were mead-medicated, untroubled by pain, their sleep untainted by sorrow. Grendel hurt, and so he hunted. This stranger taught the Danes about time. He struck, seized 30 dreaming men, and hied himself home, bludgeoning his burden as he bounded, for the Danes had slept sweetly in a world that had woken him, benefited from bounty, even as they'd broken him. When golden teeth tasted the sky, Grendel's silent skill was seen. His kills, grim crimson spilt on banquet boards. The war horde wailed at the spoiling of their sleep, at the depths they'd dived in darkness, while their enemy ate. A mournful morning. Their leader sat at his plate, old overnight, impotent at this ingress. The band tracked the invader, but not to his lair. They had prayers to call out, and pains to bear. Grendel did not stay himself from slaughter. The next night a second slaying, and then another, his rope played out and rotted through, a cursed course plotted without mercy, and course after course cold in his keep. Bro, it was easy after that to count the weepers, men fleeing to cotes beneath the king's wings. You'd have to have been a fool to miss the malice of the hell-dweller, now hall-dwelling. Those who lived left, or locked themselves in ladies' lodgings, far from fault lines. Those who stayed, slain. For 12 snow seasons Grendel reigned over evening. Hrothgar suffered, Heorot buffeted, no hero to hold it. Every outsider talked shit, telling of legends and losses. Hrothgar's hall became a morgue, dark marks on floorboards. No songs, no scops, no searing meat, no blazing fire. And Grendel, incomplete, raided endlessly. Sorry, raided relentlessly. Much better. That's alliteration. Dude, this was what they call a blood feud. a war that tore a hole through the hearts of the Danes. Grendel was broken and would not brook peace, desist in dealing deaths, or die himself. He had no use for stealth. He came near nightly, and never negotiated. The old councillors knew better than to expect a settlement in silver from him. Ringless Grendel's fingers, kingless his country. Ringless Grendel's fingers, kingless his country. Be it wizened vizier or beardless boy, he hunted them across foggy moors, an owl mist-diving for mice, grist grinding their tails in his teeth. A Hellion's home is anywhere good men fear to tread. Who knows the dread this marauder mapped? Grendel, enemy to everyone, waged his war without an army, lonesome as he lapped the luxurious lengths of Heorot. He howl-haunted the hall at night, the gold gifter's throne throwing shade at him, his soul burning with dark flame. He couldn't touch the treasure or tame his yearning, for he'd been spurned by God. Times were hard for the prince of the Scyldings, too. Heart shattered, battered spirit spent. Men came to advise, bringing pithy plots and plans to arrest Hrothgar's awful guest. They bent themselves to idols, and offered up their own spells, that a soul-slayer might suddenly show up and save them. That was their nature, these heathens, hoping at the wrong heavens, remembering hell, but nothing else. They knew no true lord, no god, no master. They, too, were cursed, yet thought themselves clear. Bro, lemme say how fucked they were, in times of worst woe throwing themselves on luck rather than on faith, firewalkers swearing their feet uncharred while smoke stepping. Why not face the boss, and at death seek salves, not scars? So it went for years, the hell-sent raider harrowing the half-Dane's son, who sat in silence, brooding over unhatched hopes, while in the dark his people shuddered, salt-scourged by weeping, by nights spent waking instead of sleeping. News went global. In Geatland, and I'm pretty sure it's Heolak. It's another. So G's and H's are going to mess with me. Because there's a rule for H's if it's on its own, it's like a loch. But if it is in the middle of a word, if it's on its own. Let's see. Heolak. G's are mostly silent. The only time they aren't is after a C. Fortunately, we have one of those. And I am forewarned on that one. Even though it looks counterintuitive. Which is hard for me, not for you. You only have to hear it. I have to get it right. So Heolak, not Higalak. Looks like Higalak, but it's Heolak. All right, sorry. In Geatland, Heolak's right-hand man heard about Grendel. Bro, here was a warrior like no other. Massive, mighty, born of noble blood. He called for a ship to be readied for his band, and boasted he'd try his teeth on this tale, sail in as a savior over the Swan Road, seek that king, and lend a hand as defender. His elders understood his quest, and though he was dear to them, they knew better than to spear him with speeches. They augured the omens, ooh, and ushered him onward. He found 14 fists for hire, the boldest men of the Geats, and enlisted them as fighters. He, as their captain, went aboard to pilot the vessel with sea skill through keen currents and mean depths. Soon it was time to depart. The boat's belly was wet, and beneath the landlocks these warriors met, cheering, bringing battle gear into her bosom. As sand spit and surf sang, they pushed off and sent themselves to sea, made men. The wind sent them surging, with foam-feathered throat. Their bird flew their bird flew free, sailing with certainty over salt waters. On the second day she sought a shore, and the men saw cliffs, crags uplifting from the ocean, the end of the voyage. Overboard the Geats leapt. And I am pronouncing that correctly? Yes, Geats. Overboard the Geats leapt, shifting from sailors to soldiers the moment their souls touched solid earth. Their weapons rattled as they moored the boat, their mail unveiled in sunlight. They thanked God for easy passage and sweet seas. Far above them, the Scyldings' watchman waited. It was his duty to keep these cliffs unclimbed. When his gaze hit gleam, swords and shields glittering across the gangplank, passing without permission, Hrothgar's men set out for the sand on horseback, straight spear in hand, to stand formally, and question them. How dare you come to Denmark costumed for war? Chainmail and swords? There's a dress code. You're denied. I'm the Danes' doorman. This is my lord's door. Who are you that you dare steer your ship for our shore? I'm the watcher of these waters, have been for years, and it's my duty to scan the sea for shield-bearing dangers to Danes. I've never seen any force come so confidently over swells, certain of welcome, no welcome won. Did you send word? No. Were you invited? No. You're not on the guests list. And, also, who's the giant? What weapons does he hold? Ah, hell no. He's no small-time hall soldier, but noble. Look at his armour. I'm done here. Spies, state your secrets and be denounced. Who are you? What's your business? Where'd you come from? I'll ask one more time. You're not coming past this cliff. Answer now or bounce. You men, who? Where? Why? Their leader unlocked his word hoard. He was the senior soldier, so he spat certainty. We're Geats, born and Geats, sorry. We are Geats, born and bred, bound to Hwælach. My father was, Edgetheo. No doubt you've heard of him. He was famous. He lived through winters that would oppress the life from a lesser, and though he's long since left us, everyone the world over knows my daddy's name. We come in peace, looking for your lord and land shield, the son of the half-Dane. Kindly give us directions and we'll get gone. We're here to offer ourselves up to the Dane's lord, and our plans are open, no secrets from you. Is it true that something savage walks at night? We've heard the stories that misery stalks and rages here, that good men are endangered here by a stranger in this country. We come to counsel your king on how to cleave his reaver and court calm. If there's respite to be had, I'm the lad to bring it. Otherwise, Hrothgar will be grieving and desperate as long as his hall hangs. I see it there, at the horizon. The watchman was unmoved, his authority innate. He sat tall on horseback. I know the difference between words and deeds, as anyone with half a brain does. Thus far I'll endorse your scheme. You seem a troop true to my lord. The rest is in the proving. Come then, bring your battle gear. I'll lead you to my leader, and send my guards to circle your new tarred ship on the sandbar, until it's time for her to rise ring proud over this rolling road, and be boarded again by whichever of you, if any, survive the sword storm you've sought. Off they went, agreed, leaving their own mounts, that wide wave rover, hitched to rope and anchor. Boars bristled from their cheek shields, gold forced into fierce forms by fire. The watchman led them toward their war. 15 men heeded him and marched with speed until the timbered hall was before them, shimmering, golden, the structure best known under the sun and stars to every citizen of earth. This was a place real men could be rebirthed, and their guide pointed the path to it, then turned tail, saying, "I've been away from my sea view too long. May the Father leave you living. For me, I return to my ocean post to scan the shore for other enemies." The road was stone cobbled, and kept them coming correct, a straight line of marchers, war garb gleaming, chains linked by hardened hands, their armor ringing, loud as any hall bell. By the time they arrived in HWÆT, dressed for demons, they were sagging, sea-stung. They stacked shields, wood-weathered, against the walls, then sat down on benches, their metal making music. Their spears they stood like sleeping soldiers, tall but tilting, grey ash, a death grove. Each maker of armour din was twinned to his weapon. A man of Hrothgar's company, admiring them, inquired, "What kingdom set you up here, boys, with your crests and shields, your gilt helmets and grey-clothed chests, your sharpened spears? I'm Hrothgar's herald and officer, and in all my years I've never seen such an impressive assembly of outlanders. You've too much style to be exiles, so I expect you must be heroes, sent to Hrothgar." The man, we know him, his name means nerve, the leader of the Geats, hard core in his helmet, spoke their mission succinctly. "We're Hewlac's reserve, trained and ready. Beowulf's my name. If the Halfdane's son, your leader and lord, will allow me to come to him, I'll explain my errand in a few words." Wulfgar, a Wendel warrior, renowned and warranted for wisdom and for the tempered edge of his nature, replied, "I'll ferry your request to our king and ring-giver, lord of the Scyldings, and see what, if anything, he offers in response. I'll return with his answer as quickly as he gives it to me." He went with haste to Hrothgar's sorry. He went with haste to Hrothgar's throne. The old man was grey, huddled in pain with his retainers. Bold Wulfgar stood submissive at his shoulder. He knew the score. He whispered the matter to his lord. "Geatlanders have come ashore, sea sullied from their long sail. Their captain and compeller is called Beowulf, and he petitions for words with you. Hrothgar, most generous, don't deny them. They're well dressed, thus well born, and thus worthy. And the man who led them here, he looks so right. His chest broad in girth, his armour blazing bright, blatantly of noble birth." Hrothgar, the Scyldings' helm, lifted his head. "Beowulf! I knew him when he was a boy, and I knew his daddy too. Ecgtheow, from whom Hrethel the Great bedded his daughter down. It is Hrethel, I think. Is that even mentioned? No, it's not, so it must be right. Hrethel the Geat, I knew his daddy, Ecgtheow, with whom Hrethel the Geat bedded his daughter down. Their son and heir is to bring health to me. A crew of mine once crossed to Geatland with gifts from me to his father, and they brought back a cargo of stories. Ecgtheow's boy, they said, had a hand grip as strong as that of 30 men. As for his band of Geats, hurry, let them in.
Holy! How good is God! A hero's been sent here by heaven to defend the Danes from Grendel. At least, that's what I hope he's come to do. If he relieves the pressure on our paradise, I'll pay him in gold. Go back before he comes to his senses and runs. Bid him appear before his father's friend. He's more than welcome here in Denmark. Wulfgar returned to the Geats, stood at the door, and said, My king, the East Danes' leader in arms, tells me he knows your father, and that you seafarers are welcomed into Heorot. He hails you as he would homecoming soldiers. Go, dressed in your war gear, your helms, your masks, and present yourselves to Hrothgar. Hrothgar, no shields necessary, nor spears, boys. Leave your slaughter slingers here. Beowulf arose, and around him rose his armored army, though some stayed to guard the war hoard by request. They hastened behind their leader through Heorot's radiance. Their battle-bringer stood before the fire, glowing, and considered his words, his chain-mail the myth-protecting work of a smith, links netted to one another for war glory. His helmet made him look harder, so he spoke from beneath it. My respects to Hrothgar. I'm a kinsman of Hygelac, and over the years, no boasts, I've been known for my promise and prowess. I heard tell of Grendel from sailors. Seriously, the whole world knows the stories, swapped and sworn, of Heorot Hall's early curfew, how every night you surrender to silence when the sun sprints out of heaven, leaving the celestial dome dark. Every elder knew I was the man for you, and blessed my quest, King Hrothgar, because where I'm from, I'm the strongest and the boldest, and the bravest and the best. Yes, I may have bathed in the blood of beasts, netted 5 foul ogres at once, smashed my way into a troll den and come out swinging, gone skinny dipping in a sleeping sea and made sashimi of some sea monsters. Anyone who fucks with the Geats, bro, they have to fuck with me. They're asking for it, and I deal them death. Now, I want to test my mettle on Grendel, best him, a match from man into meat. Just us two, hand to hand. Sweet. Let me ask one thing, though, king of the bright Danes, friend of men, dire defender against the dark, he who knows what it means to fight. Trust me on this. Don't refuse my humble request. We came a long way, me and my men, to conquer your curse and cleanse Heorot. This task should be ours, and ours alone, as discussed. I'm told your pest mocks metal. In that case, I'll make my man Hygelac proud, his fame fiercer. Your boy will enshroud his blade, and fight with fingers and nails. No sword, no shield, no safety net, nothing but my grip, a hand-clasped battle to the death. When we see who wins, we'll know who's got God's favor. If it's Grendel, I'll be a mere chapter in his gory story. He'll feast on Geats, ripping my men limb from limb, and I won't be there to protect them. I'll be dead too, cheekbones chewed and face forgotten, my body dragged to his lair, where he'll fare alone on my severed head, make a banquet of my flesh, he and I, alone again, naturally. Don't cry for this broken boy. Don't lay out what's left of me. If warfare revokes my pass to Earth's kingdom, just send this mail shirt made by Wieland, willed to me by my grandfather Hrethel, to Hygelac. Horrors happen. I'm grown. I know it. Bro, fate can fuck you up. Hrothgar, the Scyldings' own skull protector, had some things to say. Beowulf, I count you a favored friend right now. Your father, I knew him from a feud, which he began by killing Heotholaf. Oh, jeez. Heotholaf. Heotolaf? How's that pronounced? Is that even mentioned? It's not. Sugar. My cheat sheet is incomplete. It rhymes. I'm going to guess it's Heotolaf. Your father, I knew him from a feud, which he began by killing Heotolaf. That too, hand to hand. And Heotolaf was a wolfing, so that shit couldn't stand. Your father's country wouldn't keep him. They threw him out, and he set sail over sea to me. I was a young king of the Danes then, hauling up a hoard of treasure. That ladder's rungs burnt beneath me. My brother Heorogar had died, and he was the firstborn, the better. I was the lesser brother, but it didn't matter. I fixed your father's feud with fistfuls of old gold, my treasure shipped to stop his country's wound. Ecgtheow owed me allegiance ever after. Oh, it hurts my head that the world knows of my grief, of Heorot's heartbreaker. Is there laughter in far-off places at me and at my men? I'm humiliated my hall force has bent to Grendel's greed, and I'm short of saviours, bleeding the brave, feeding them to fate. God giving ground not to heroes, but to this 12-winter shit season. And yet, over and over, when golden mead was pouring, warriors swore their safety was nothing compared to Heorot's. They'd sleep with swords, with certainty, but when the sun rose, slaughter. Benches bloody, no sign of those brave soldiers, the floor a pool, where once it was a playground for poets. It's all written in red. Know before you dine, Beowulf, your predecessors are deceased. But sit down, my new old friend. Boy, enjoy the feast. Take your place in the tale of my heroes and their hopes. A banquet bench was brought, an empty one, so every Geat could sit beside his brothers, and there they dined in splendor. At their shoulders stood a server, and he held a jeweled ewer filled with mead, sweet for singing and for feasting. A scop sang too, his voice surging like a swallow into the verging arches of Heorot, cheering for this party of Danes and Geats. All bold men met to bet on Beowulf. Near Hrothgar's feet squatted Unferth. Oh, how is Eglaf pronounced? Is that one mentioned? It is not. Must be Edglaf, because it follows the same rules. Eglaf. Egg. Eglaf. There we go. Near Hrothgar's feet squatted Unferth, Eglaf's son. Unconvinced, whispering churlish words. Beowulf's bravado bristled him, and envy ate him alive. He'd historically been glorious, and the notion that another, more notorious under heaven, might enjoy greater greatness made him gnash.
Bro, do you happen to be the Beowulf who challenged Brekka in the open ocean, insisting you should swim in shark seas for no reason but to prove your petty prowess? Boasting that no boat should guard your lives, but that you should risk them recklessly? I heard no one could convince you two of clarity, that you dove overboard, surfing on stupidity, swearing you knew the currents better than any other, and that you, swole as a troll fed on travelers, were superior to any swell. You lolled for 7 nights in wintry waters, and in the end he outswam your fool self, skipped ashore unscathed though uncertain, and rolled onto the sand safely in the land of the Heothoriams. From there he went to his home country, where the Brandings adored him, a calm and pleasant place, and returned to his hall, his host. His boyish boast was proven, yes, he'd bested Beowulf. No matter your other battles, the tales you told, the lines you sold, buddy, at least you lived. This time, bro, know it. No one's ever lasted a night clasped in Grendel's arms.
Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, wasn't fazed. Well, actually, buddy, sit down. You're drunk. Unferth, you've run your mouth about Brecca, me, and our sea swagger, but let me drop some truth into your tangent. I've been better on the water, deeper in the drink, and stronger in the swim than any man alive. Brecca and I were boys together. Our desires were only dares, one upon the other, brother to brother. Maybe you know this story? But hold up. I forgot. You've got no brothers left. We declared ourselves adventurers, so we swam, swords in hands for safety, unsheathed, father forged. We knew there were sharks. No one here is stupid. He couldn't float freer or swim straighter than and I had no urge to leave him or lose the lesser swimmer. I was Brecca's lifeguard. I knew my duty. The rains rocked us and storms shook us, and for 5 nights we floated, warring against winds from the north, the waves like blades, bone cold, until at last we were blown apart, the biting beasts of the bottom roiling up to wring me, wrestling me to the sea floor. All that held me was my armor, clasped hands made of gold, chainmail gainsaying waves and wet, the work of ancestors forging my ferocity. It kept me bold enough to fight when a monster dragged me down and gripped me, ripping at my skin. I was pinned, swaddled in squalor. Last chance, I took it. I put that monster down. I made it a sleeper as it leaped, severed its spine, spiked its skull, and split it into smithereens. My own strength sank that sea monster, and soon I was fighting again, lower than any human sight, outside even the edges of God's light. Dark deeps, hell's creatures in them, swinging my sword beneath the eyes of the world. I would not be eaten, nor beaten, no skewered swimmer I, no drowned dinner for a circle of cold companions, gobbling my guts, glutted on my gold. At dawn I surfaced in a slurry of scales, floating flotsam where formerly there'd been fangs. I'd sacrificed myself to save every subsequent seafarer from deep despair, and the monsters of the dark were gone. The east was gilded with God, and the sea was smooth. I could see the shore, the strong cliffs rising, built of their own bruises. If a man's brave enough, fate, when on the fence, will often spare him. I'd never brag, but the truth is my sword slew 9 singular scavengers that night. There are no ocean-going stories more awful than mine, no tales of greater terror, no other man so sea-stalked, but I survived, my salvation in my own hands. The waves bore me shoreward, attending me, and left me at long last in the land of the Finns. The end. I've racked my brain, bro, but Unferth, I can't unpack any similar stories of heroics from you. Let me say it straight. You don't rate, and neither did Brecca when it came to battle. The Gulf? You're cattle, and I'm a wolf. I'm not even mentioning your sins, your kin killing, your brother beating. I'm not the man to damn you. No shit, though, Unferth. If you were the bitter, brawling brave you claimed to be, your king wouldn't have suffered a single night of Grendel's rampage. No bitten bones, no hall horror, no chaos in his kingdom. Grendel was aware he had nothing to fear here. Your sword's soft, son. No warrior awaited him in Hyorod. The Scyldings were unshielded, their hall unguarded. He knew he could crush you, comfort himself with grappling, grind your bones to make his bread. He's got no fear of beer hall brothers, but, this you can quote, he'll fear me. There's no guns of note on anyone but me and my Geats. Come on, Eglav's son, beat me, or better yet, make me a bet that Grendel's maker won't be met. Then, if you brave boys feel like drinking, I'll serve you ale for breakfast, the sun shining on silver and gold, daylight yours after night's been mine. This speech was more than enough to convince the ring giver, his hair gray, his war grace blazing. The king of the Bright Danes knew now he could defend his people with an assist from this warrior of the wider world. He got the party started, loud and lordly, and the halls welled up and overran with laughter. Walchtheo appeared among them then, Hrothgar's queen. Gleaming, her gown golden, she chose her chance to charm. She was the cup keeper. She raised it high to show the men, then bore it to Hrothgar, Dane's delight, her husband and home holder. She held it to his lips, and he drank deeply, the love of country in each draught. He threw it back as fast as once he'd drawn his sword, this old, old lord of war, and his men cheered. She went round, a helming hostess, treading with purpose, rings shining, beer sounding soldiers, old and young, both of her own house. And the sea slayers, goblet held to her breast. Hashtag blessed. At last Beowulf was before her, fingers outstretched. She welcomed him carefully to Heorot as a hero, a man who'd answer hopes with hands, and who might, please God, finally redeem her land from hell. The warrior took the cup from. Oh, jeez. Sorry. The warrior took the cup from Walchtheo, eager for the end of festivities, for the night and fight to come. He was ready for his war, and a wight awaited him. Beowulf sipped, and the son of and the son of Ecgtheow assured the queen. Woman, I knew my plan when I set off for this coast. Before I put my band in that boat, already I was bent on victory. I mean to give you a show, to make you sleep safe or be slain myself, Grendel's spikes in my skin. I'm gonna do as real men do, and render myself a reaper, bleed him dry, or let death attend me and cupbear in your place, here in this mead hall. The hostess was impressed by Beowulf's boasts. Brass balls, if nothing else. She posted up beside Hrothgar, queenly, her gold glinting. There was more celebration, the kind of party that hadn't been heard of in a while, rowdy and riotous, loud with laughter and proud poetry, until the half-Dane's air arrested rhyme for rest. The fiend, he knew, had been silent, subterranean while the sun shone, but now it was night. Darkness draped the earth. The happy hall would soon be a demon's domain, the men his dreadful diet. Shadows slunk from the swamp, and mists mossed the cliffs and hillsides. The men stood witness as their leaders took leave. Hrothgar wished luck on the late lingerer, gave him all hall power, and proclaimed, I've never, not in all my years of shield bearing, trusted any other could hold this hall from horrors. It's yours tonight. May you ward it well. It was built for the tenders of the flame. Keep your reputation in mind, and stand unyielding against the brute. If I find you alive in the morning, I'll reward you beyond your wildest dreams. Hrothgar and his household left the hall, the leader and protector of the Scyldings, bound to
Why do I keep having trouble with that one? Walchtheo. The leader and Hrothgar and his household left the hall, the leader and protector of the Scyldings bound to Waltheo's bed for comforts, his wifely strife soother. The king, it would prove, had appointed a watcher whose muscles were monster matched, fate directed, to the Dane chief as prince protector. The Geats knew all this already. They trusted their man, his iron arms and brawling brand. Beowulf stripped, removed his breastplate and helmet, handed off his fine-forged heirloom sword. His servant swooned over that sweet smith steel, ordered in no uncertain terms to ward and keep it safe. Beowulf headed to bed, swollen with certainty, and swore, this mortal gift from God, "I don't know what you've heard about hand-to-hand, but my hands are better than good, man. I'm direr than any demon. I won't slice Grendel with a sword, boys. Too simple. I'd end him too quickly. It'd be unfair. He has no skill, only reptilian skin. His mind's got no flair for strategy, though his strength is savant. Nope, I'll go unarmed into this evening, and he'll take it on the chin, if he's got guts enough not to flee. May God referee this ring and declare the winner whichever of us he wishes." Then Beowulf dropped his head to pillow, and beside him rested his command of brave men, warriors of sea and sleep. They were ready to see life's end, and didn't expect to lay eyes on their heartland again, not familiar soil, not their parents, not their wives. They knew the story of the slaughterer, the dozen years Danes had been driven from their home hall. The Almighty, though, had other plans, a tapestry of terror threaded with triumph, the weather Geats the victors. They'd rise with their leader, crush the challenger, and cruise through creation, kinsman to a king. You know how it goes. God's the final decider, and men only the question askers, students seeking solace. In the dead of night Grendel emerged, a predator without need of torch, surged to the shadows. Nearly all the guards were sleep-sagging, chins to chests. They'd stitched themselves to God, and knew no enemy could hem them in, not without almighty approval. Just one Thane waited, feigning sleep as the hour grew late. He lay awake, on high alert. Hidden by fog, Grendel roved the moors, God cursed, grudge worsening. He knew who he hunted. Wine drunk, mead met men, and he pined for his prey. Under storm clouds he stalked them, in his usual anguish, feeling a forbidden hearth, that gilded hall atop the hill, gleaming still through years of bloodshed. This was not the first time he'd hunted in Hrothgar's hall, but never before nor later had he such hard luck. No one worthy had historically lain in wait. The warrior worked his way toward the war, his head and heart hurting, and arrived at the iron-crossed door. Its hinges howled a welcome, and his rage ratcheted up. He flung the hatch wide and leapt into the mead room, over decorated floors, into the hold, fury frothing. His heart crowed as he counted them, man by man, nested together, roosting like roasting chickens. He'd be the sort of fox that stalks the night, eat his fill, no coup remaining, no bill, only feathers loose on the floor. Before sunrise he planned to prize souls from skeletons. His weird, though, would no longer be writ in others' blood. Actually, I think it's pronounced word. His word, though, it's WYRD. His word, though, would no longer be writ in others' blood, red footprints to the door and out, the moors, the mere. No. Tonight was the night Grendel's goose would be cooked, his funeral banquet bruised and blue. Fervid and flexing, faking sleep, Hygelac's servant spied from his bench, scanning slit-eyed the long-haunted hall, awaiting the hunted hunter. At last his enemy struck, snatching a sleeper, sucking him bone dry, staining the pale planks red, grunting, gobbling, gnawing him limb from limb, here a throat, here a head, fingers, feet, dead. Hands outstretched to slaughter. A second, Grendel dropped his first course, spotting the bed where Beowulf slept. He gripped that sleeper, though, and found himself conscripted, his own hand grabbed by a commanding Geat. The grasp began the tear that would take Grendel out, rendering him a revenant in the hall he'd always reveled in. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that so much. Oh, the grass began the tear that would take Grendel out, rendering him a revenant in the hall he'd always reveled in. Oh, that tickles my fancy. His bones cracked, but he could not wrestle free from the clasp, war wedded to a woe-bringer, who clung like no human ever clung, keeping him close. Grendel was an unwilling draftee, never bested before nor held hostage. Now Hygelac's man, chanting the boasts he'd made his bed rhyme, climbed from the covers to get a better grip. Knuckles buckled, joints unjoined. The attacker became the attacked, racked with pain, attempting to escape, to race from hall to fens, his hidden highways. His own grasp unlatched, his flesh-locks loosened, try though he might to divest himself of Heorot and return home, dive into the dark and abide with any awful thing there, stay in stealthy health the rest of his days. The room shook, benches splintered, and Danes dreamt of doom, or quivered, questioning. The warriors wrestled, muscles bulging, and raged, screaming for their lives, and the hall trembled but stayed standing, its design fit for fighting, the wooden walls crossed with iron bands, a forest fettered together. Though from what I've heard, the mead benches stood on end and shattered, gold sigils no match for battle. The two fighters fought on in the rubble. I mean, damn, man, until this night, no Scylding would have believed the hall could be felled by anything but flame, its ivory and iron, its careful cantilevers. Tonight, though, it risked timbering. A wailing clamor rose again, echoing over the confines, and the North Danes listened to the sound of Doom's hammer, instability building a home in the hearts of those who heard it. The whole hill quaked with the shriek of that almighty abrogate, the loner's lament, handcuffed by hopelessness, losing to an unforeseen leader. The warrior holding him was stronger than any monster, more muscular than any man. The stalwartest of soldiers had no wish to imprison the invader, only to slay him. Grendel's life wasn't worth living, and Beowulf had decided to end it. His own men stood too as the unarmed enemies swung heirloom blades willy-nilly, though really their captain needed no safe keeping. They swung for the slayer's soul, but their struggle was for naught. They could have stayed sleeping rather than fought, or merely watched the battle, for their swords, sharp as they were, couldn't injure the fiend. His spells warded him, annealing his skin. Still, his death would be agony. The world clung to his fingers, and life leaving wouldn't be swift, no existence snuffing instantaneous gift, but sickly, slow suffering, his sinning spirit sent to sink slowly down to hell. He knew it now, he who'd spent seasons haunting this hall, preying on poets, bringing pain to the privileged, infuriating the Almighty. His body was breached, its bones were breaking. Higelac's kinsmen had him, hand-welded. Each of them, living, cancelled out the other, as Cain had Abel, brother unbrothered. Grendel's shoulder split, tendons twisting, arteries unscrolled, his limb worried from him, bested by fatal fists. Beowulf the winner, Grendel dismissed. He ran then for his grave, still living. He rushed to the water, wound weeping, lair his last longing. His hourglass was emptying now, his days done, and he knew it. Each heartbeat wrote its number in red, and the Ring-Danes were delivered of their wretch with a ring. That's a W-R-I-N-G. This enemy was dead. The ranger had arranged a cleansing, swept the hall while the Danes were sleeping, done the danger in. He was pleased with himself, a Geat's son's boasts proven in the Danes' den. He'd unharrowed HWÆT hall, and Hrothgar's humiliations held no further horrors. The darkness of recent fate now taking the form of someone lately late. Even if the whole wasn't here, but only a hand, Grendel's arm, torn off by the hero at the shoulder and hung on high, the span of his grasp displayed. Bro, I've heard when dawn broke, soldiers stampeded to the ring hall, chieftains coming to contemplate the cooling corpse portion. Warriors and wild men from all over the realm, wide-eyed with wonder, overwhelmed at the sight of Grendel's tracks in the dirt, no sorrow there for those who'd suffered him, but satisfaction at the marks of misery where he'd conveyed himself from hall door to mere shore, bleeding out. He'd left a river of gore, and the warriors had no regrets, imagining him dropping, a doomed carcass, into those wicked waters, which even now were blood-clotted, scarlet drifts. Oh, the gift of this! The devil diver deep in the dark, dimmer and dimmer yet, dying, dying, dead. Here was the truth, everyone knew it. Grendel was headed down, hell bent. Off they went, the elderly officers, and the young men behind them, all mounted, white men on white horses, praising their heaven-sent hero, Beowulf, with every word they spoke. Not north, nor south, nor anywhere, they said, was there a man more qualified to be king. There was a lot of country between the coasts, a lot of open air beneath the sky, and even there, nope, no one better to rule. Of course, this unfettered praise wasn't meant to blame Hrothgar for anything. No, no, that was a good king. They were giddy enough to gallop for the first time in years, pale horses racing on trails long unused, though famous once for being smooth. And a poet, a long-term comrade of the king, a man mindful of metre, with a memory made of myriad myths, began to compose the Tale of Beowulf, his enviable exploits and Geatish feats. Yes, the sentences rhyming rapturously, since now the man was elite enough for permanence. The Scop had opinions, and he shared them. Compare, contrast. Stories he'd heard about another warrior, Siegmund. Verses detailing that man's hidden past, stealthy acts, dark secrets, spat only into his kinsman's ear. The world-roaming of Wales' defiant air, all those old tales whispered to Fitela, from uncle to nephew. Ouch. Who'd together slain giants, their swords strong as their certainties. After he died, Siegmund was shaped into story glory for his crowning kill, cutting through the hide of a hoard-holder, a dragon whose cave he'd crawled inside, outrageously alone, without even Fitela. He was fortunate in his fortune hunting. His sword stabbed the serpent and sliced it like butter, straight through scale to stone, and the dragon died, leaving bounty and bones to Whale's son, who claimed the treasure for himself. He loaded his ship with glitter. The dragon, even dead, was so embittered it melted, smelting dark intention into the metal. These days everyone knows Siegmund's name, the most famous exile. Far and wide he swung his sword, and his fortune swelled in the years after King Heremod lost his way. That king was attacked and betrayed, stung in Jutland, ultimately undone. His mood swings had mauled his men, emboldened his foes, and fractured his friends. Senility was suspected, and his advisers sorrowed, those who'd relied on him to think clearly, those who'd trusted the inheritor of the throne to behave as his daddy had, reigning righteously, paying promptly, shielding the shielding's safety. Beowulf is surely such a man, adored by friends and men and every living thing, but other kings have hoarded horrors in their hearts. While the Scop spun, Danes and Geats raced, harrowing the highway with hooves. The sunlight was bright and brighter, and young men herded themselves to Heorot, to gape at the gory glory therein. The king himself, hoary, hallowed, hoard holder, ring bringer, came boldly out of the women's wing, good man incarnate, flanked by ranks of ladies, his queen beside him, and paced a path from maid hall to mead hall. Hrothgar stood on the stairs, staring at the ceiling he'd commissioned. Amid golden gleam hung Grendel's attrition, a lacerated limb. First and most fervent, we give thanks to the Ever-bearer for this sight, our long struggle cleared in a single night. We've suffered years of hall harvesting here, but hard times are done at last. God is good. Grendel is gone. Only yesterday I thought my heart would never be mended, the evening rending endless, this house of heroes red-rouged, my council risking life and limb to bed down in their home hall, and defend this place from demons, yet every morning dozens dead. Now, with an almighty assist, this man has done what no man did before. His mother, I forget who she is she still alive? Should be proud of her prince, and answer to prayers. Beowulf, regardless of whether your parents survive, you're my son now, adoption won by wily work. Be good to me, I'll be good to you, I always say. You'll need nothing in life, boy. I'll feed you, feat you, and count you as my foundling. You're a king to be. I've decorated countless others, treated lesser warriors as brothers, and rewarded the inferior for fearlessness, or what passed for it then. Now, though, my standards have shifted. You're more than a man, but an immortal. Your valor in this hall will live in legend. I implore the Lord to keep you, my ward, in his grace, and wield his power on your behalf. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, replied, We're lucky to be living, having gone into battle with only bright intentions, against a stranger whose might we hadn't measured. I wish you'd been awake to watch me bring war to your enemy, to see him beaten, but it was not to be. I meant to put him in a headlock, lash him to his deathbed, and bludgeon him, clench my fists around his throat, strangle till he gasped his last. But alas, the Lord set him free. What can I say? He slithered from my fingers like a serpent, and slipped my knots, screeching for the exit. He paid his passage in pulses, though, and left a limb behind, holding the door, his hand, arm, and shoulder. There they stayed, proof of his incursion, much as he regretted it. Behold! Nothing could live limited like that.
The last of his blood must have boiled by now, braiding itself about his body, chaining him in coils of pain. He's dying now, if not already dead, a sinner awaiting sentence. God, not me, will judge him. Previously prone to calling bullshit, Unferth, Eglaf's son, was stymied as the roomful of nobles took note of the horrible hand, hanging whole, armpit to fingertips, high in the eaves. The nails were notorious, hard as though smith forged, and the heathen's hand was calloused as a carpenter's, weathered by work and warring. Everyone swore to what they'd seen. No sword could stab through that skin, no fight fang tear it. Then all hands were hauled on deck by order of the king to restore Heorot to its former splendor, citizens resurrecting glamour blunted by gore. The golden threads in tapestries, depicting scenes of sweeter times, distractions in gleaming designs, now hung haphazard in the ruined room. Reinforced as the walls had been, they were still wreckage, door hinges bent, braces broken. Only the ceiling remained uncracked. The intruder had fled first, afraid of expiring far from home. Death, no matter our desires, can't be distracted. We know this much is true, and it's true for all souls. Each of us will one day find the feast finished, and, fattened or famished, step slowly backward into their own dark hall for that final night of sleep. In due time the Halfdane's heir appeared. Tonight the king would dine triumphant at his own table, reclaimed from ruin. Never before had everyone shown up so festive, so fiery, to pay tribute to their bounty bringer. Every major man was there, pounding cups of mead. Even the king shouted for rounds. His nephew Hrothulf sat there beside him, spirits flowing, hearts glowing, in Heorot Hall. Back then, remember, the Scyldings were not yet inclined toward treachery, though things would change. Hrothgar gave his own father's sword to Beowulf, presented it formally. With a helmet, mail shirt, and war banner, all precious property of his people. Beowulf drank deeply, pleased and petted, feted to the utmost, gifts raining down upon him like pennies from heaven. The Halfdane's sword, the gold, the glitz, the rest of the hall soldiers watched it happen. I mean, personally, I've never seen anything like it. So many treasures sliding down the table, a battle dowry moved from man to man, over ale, no less. No fighting? No fury? Nope, bro, this was a certain type of night. The golden helmet, for example, was ringed with ridges, wrapped in wire to tire any sword that sought the skull of a shield warrior occupied with other enemies. Now the king called for 8 steeds to be led into the hall, each in its own horse helmet, harnessed in gold, and one mare was buckled under Hrothgar's own saddle, the same saddle he used for swordplay, gem dripping, blinged out, brought forth only when the king himself was slaying. That man, remember, was the first to fight in wartime, the first to kill, swinging before any of his boys could be slain. Ing's descendant dropped all these delights upon Beowulf, these weapons, these horses, ordering him to use them in health. Yeah, the Lord of Heorot paid properly, tendered treasure for services rendered in blood. Anyone knows how fair it was. Bro, more than fair. And more than this, even, the king bequeathed to each of the sea soldiers on Beowulf's bench. Every life-risker got a golden gift of his own, and the man who'd been assassinated by Grendel was vindicated in treasure. The invader would have murdered many more, had God not gotten in the mix. One man's mettle kept the rest from massacre. You have to look at it this way, and reconcile yourself.
God's in charge, always has been, always will be, and anyone who lives long will endure both ecstasy and ugliness. It was an hour for singing then, and instruments were hauled out for the battle bringing king, who called for harps, epics, and heroic histories. Healgamen, Hrothgar's poet, was ready with rhymes, spitting the saga of the sons of Finn, word whipping his way into the fight in Friesland, the day the Danish king, Hnath of the Scyldings, I think that's Hnath, Hnath, yes, Hnath of the Scyldings fell to lack of fealty. Hildeburh had nothing tender to say about the Jutes and their loyalties. She'd surrendered her son and brother here, her home hall become a brutal battlefield, innocent of crime, yet cursed, captured, speared, worse. Hawk's daughter was savaged by sorrow, grief gutted. Who wouldn't weep as dawn drove feud daggers deeper, the sun scoring her son's wounds, day breaking upon her dearest dead? They'd been her heart, her happiness, her hopes. War had wrung them ragged, dragged them to death across a court of sword-crossed kin. There was no fighting now, no. Finn had only lack left. He could not attack from here and battle to the end with Hengist. Though this had been his own hall, most of his men were dead, and what could Finn, the host, do to preserve the rest from their enemies? A truce was his only option, a partitioned hall, sword split in half. The Danes quartered in one portion, the Frisian throne and edifice now a shared territory. Daily he'd give gifts to both sides, his hands open as widely to Hengest and his men, unwillingly ruled over by their ring lord's reaper, as to his own men, the Frisians. They'd all be encouraged in encomiums. They'd all be encouraged in encomiums, given hope with heirlooms. Everyone would be hostage to hall jollity, and beer would be drunk without jeering, both sides pacified by precious things. This, then, was the treaty. The agreement was sealed in gold, all former fighters guaranteed greed grace. It was sworn solemnly by Hengist by Finn, to Hengist by Finn, and any Frisian who broke it, who thought he might divide the room with whispered insults, raising recent wrath with snide ribbing, would be pricked. The sword's point would decide. The pyre was built, gold unhoarded, to properly mourn the Scyldings' king, who slumbered on his death weald, awaiting warmth he'd never feel. The landscape was littered with reddened metal, mail-coats gored, links bent, boar-shaped helmets, dented where swords had scraped skulls. Other bodies, too, of noble Danes, unravelled by gaping wounds, travelling to journey's end. Hildeburh sent her son to his last station at Hnath's shoulder, their sole vessels to be burnt together, family finally in flame. She raised her voice in mourning, keening for her kin, as the pyre was lit. Smoke smothered her song, darkness made of skin and bone. These men who'd been tended by those who loved them were carcasses now, heads melted, wounds running, reopened for flame ravens. Fire comes from the same family as famine. It can feast unfulfilled forever. The dead of both nations were done, glory days gone for good. The fighters fell away, finding families and forts across Friesland, visiting the living, too long close quartered with corpses. Too long close quartered with corpses. Hengest, though, boarded a wicked winter in Finn's hall, heart howling for his own king and hearth, the weather too wild to loosen his ship. For him the ice and snow were tinted red, and kept him clinging to a killing country. At last, as always happens, the season shifted to spring. Another year appeared, sunlight, green tendrils, the earth's bosom in bloom, a time for returning, the exiled yearning for home. But more than that, to get it done with, the avenging, without which Hengest would be unmanned. He itched to bring justice to Utes. When Hunlafing lay a legendary sword in his lap, well, it was named Flame Fang for a reason. Any season is a season for blood, if you look at it in the right light. The Utes knew this blade already. They should have expected it to twist, to key their kingdom. Hengest only did what he had to do, tipped the pitchers, spilt the ale, red rivers running under wooden benches. Finn fell when Gutlaf and Oslaf, hard henchmen, brought up the last winter's battle, blaming brutality on their bold host, and their grief on him too, the pain of their loss unquenched, the only remedy blood balm. The Scyldings washed the walls with rancour, slew Finn and all his men, and bore away his world queen. They ransacked the hall for a hoard, grabbing all the treasure they could hold, golden collars, jewels. Onward then, over the sea, and back to Denmark, they brought their woman, straight-spined, returning her to the country she'd come from. That dark entertainment was done. Words had won over wine long enough. Now laughter conquered conversation. Serving boys poured pleasure from pitchers. Waltheow, weighted in gold, processed to her place between two good men, Hrothgar and his nephew Hrothulf, who back then yet trusted in the links of lineage. There, too, waited Unferth, at the feet of those men, the Scyldings' lords, who trusted him, too, perhaps not as much as they trusted themselves, but still a brave man, though a sibling slayer, brilliant, though a brother breaker. The lady offered up all she had to trade. "Accept this cup from me, my lord of rings, and lift this golden goblet. Give the Geats their due. Be good to them who've been good to you. Gifts are for granting, and your hands should be open, your heart happy, even as you remember, I know you do, the good men who gave the good men who gave kith gifts to you." Let's try that again. Gifts are for granting, and your hands should be open, your heart happy, even as you remember, I know you do, the good men who gave kith gifts to you. Heorot's red walls have been whitewashed, purged of horror, and I hear you've chosen a brand new son, this Cain-cleansing warrior. I know you know that life is short, that you are mortal. The blessings you bask in today are boons for bequeathing. I ask only that you gift the kingdom to your kin before your sword is sheathed in smoke. I know your nephew Hrothulf well, his noble blood, his moral code. He'll serve our sons and raise them right. I trust he'll treat them sweetly, if you should die before he does, repaying our kindness with son safety. We took him in when his father died, and if he recalls it at all, he knows how to behave. We gave the orphan everything, made him one of our brave men, when he'd have been alone.
She bent then to her boys' bench, where Hrethric and Hrothmund sat, with all the young sons of chieftains. There, too, was a grown man, good, great Beowulf the Geat, positioned between them. She brought him the cup. She called him friend. She gave him gold. Her will was wrought in rings. She offered armlets, garments, a neck ring, a collar larger than any I've ever seen, heavy as heaven is light, and all of it brighter and better than any hoard since Hamas, who himself hooked the flaming throat chain of the Brisings, those amber god reins, or is it Breezings? And trekked it back to his own fortress, fleeing Eormenric's treachery, and securing his soul with gold barter. And later, hear it, Hygelac the Geat, Sverting's nephew, would be the final owner. In his last battle, beneath banners, he'd hold to his hoard, fighting furiously, shackled to this sparkling string, this precious, poisonous thing. Fate would fell him and his prideful priorities, the Frisians following his feud fuel, and he in heavy armor, gem-governed, would be slain. He'd worn that same sparkle when he crossed the sea coop, but even champagne goes flat. His bling would go to Frankish kings, from plundered breastplate to that famous throat chain, and lowlier warriors would gloat over the goners, getting what gold they could from Geat corpses, a field full of the forgotten. One sec, let me flip ahead here. I'm already at where I thought I was going to call it off. How much time do we got? I got a little time. Give me a sec here. Okay, that is a long speech that goes on for quite a while. Yeah, actually. Actually, I was pretty much dead on. I was pretty much spot on because this is where like the next major arc kicks in. So we've got like another stanza or whatever, and then we're gonna call it. Where are you? Yes, okay. Getting what gold they could from Geat corpses, a field full of the forgotten. The hall thundered with handclaps. Walchtheo went on with her gift-giving, thus witnessed. Take this golden collar, dear Beowulf. May it keep your head on straight. Wear this mail shirt too, a treasure of my people. May it protect your heart hoard. Guide my two sons, guard them, keep them as they are tonight, and I will keep you as you are, draped in delights. You're famous here, and long after your lifetime you'll be known, your story sweeping as the sea, shores borne into being by waves of words. My prince, may you be blessed by this bounty. Keep my sons close, treat them as we treat one another here in Heorot, tenderly, trustingly, loyally. No one conspires to hurt, only to hold fast with brothers. Believe me, Beowulf, my Thane's wishes align with mine. The sole desire of those drinking here is to do my bidding when it comes to you. She settled into her seat. Wine waterfalled into men's mouths. It was a banquet unmatched in munificence. After all, they had no foretelling of fate's fixed plans. A shadow stretched over sweetness, formless and fatal. Night fell, and Hrothgar readied himself for rest, his courters calling him to sleep. Men stood guard, as they always had. The floor that bristled with benches became a swan road, white waves of bolster and feathers, and though one of those drinkers turned dreamers was doomed, he didn't know it. The Geats' shields served as shining headboards, and on each bench was arranged a helmet, hulking, a mail shirt with rings like linked fingers, and a splinterless spear, tree sleek, ready for wrath, any time, to be brought into play without notice, as was the habit of their homeland and war wanderings. They were ready to wreak havoc, any time, any place. Their lord was a lucky lord. The Geats were hardcore, but even Geats need to sleep, so sleep swept them away. One dreamer would die dreaming. This was nothing new, given Grendel's former residence in the Golden Hall, but his eviction had made evil dwindle in the minds of the defenders. That story, they thought, was over. And we will call it there. Um, yeah, because the next line is there was another chapter, which tells you something, I guess. Anyway, hopefully people are digging it. It is definitely a bold take on the Beowulf poem. I know it's not going to work for everyone. Good stuff. The dialogue reminds me of 90s modern Romeo and Juliet movie where you get those unexpected dudes, bros, and other modern slang interleaved with the old English. Yes, yes. It's some parts of it are more jarring than others. I think on the whole, this works pretty well, but it is having to work within pretty strict constraints in terms of rhythm and meter, which she does a pretty good job of hewing to from when I had to translate small chunks of it briefly in school. Um, it has been a very long time since then. Uh, so, like, I'm having to dig it back up and remember. But hopefully, well, yeah, I'm still thinking. I'm thinking we can probably do this in three installments. Would be my guess. Um, this is where some interesting tonal shifts are going to kick in. Um, Not for a while, but it's going to be kind of representational. Um, the way Grendel's mother is represented. Um, and again, this isn't for everyone, but I think anyone who's read Beowulf before now will at least get something different out of it, even if it doesn't really, even if it doesn't work for you. And again, I'm something of a purist, but she does give a really good explanation in the introduction, which I'll get to at the end, um, for her reasonings why. Part of it is just literally just to change shit. Literally just to show it in a slightly different context, or at least keep it in the context of what it is, which is a bunch of um, a bunch of monks taking long-term a bunch of different stories that were told, carried over by word of mouth, and writing them down, and then that having chunks of it lost and corroded over time or edited over time, um, by other monks collecting these stories. So it's pretty it's a reasonable take. Let me put it that way. Don't get me wrong. I love my Heaney and my Tolkien renditions of Beowulf. They're both great for very different reasons. Heaney is a bit less flowery. He's what I'd call one of the better examples of modernizing the language used in the tale. And there are tons of translations. I've only read a couple. I've read this one. I've read Heaney. I've read Tolkien. I've read I think two others.
which we had to go through way back when, so they're old now. Um, and there's wildly different schools of thought as to how to translate Beowulf, largely because Old English is effectively a dead language, and you don't really you have some people who've studied it their entire lives, but the fact of the matter is there are no native speakers of this. Um, so there is a lot of interpretation because the entire story is itself a series of interpretations. It's narratively it often goes on these wild digressions because the monks who were transcribing this stuff were like, oh well, we heard this cool story of these two dudes who did a thing that one time, and it doesn't really have a place in the narrative, but we had nowhere else to put it, so here it is in Beowulf. Usually there winds up being at least a tangential reason why the story is brought up in terms of, hey, maybe you shouldn't go betraying people, uh, that sort of thing. Um, so it's pretty cool. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I know there's a lot of people who despise it, kind of on site, this particular translation, and I get it. The purist in me is like, sees bro, kind of like, or hashtag blessed. That one just rankles no matter what. They're a pound sign, okay? It's a pound sign. I shouldn't have to explain this. But hashtag blessed flows better for the meter in question, the rhythm. Um, I love her abuse of alliteration, though. I admit I am a childlike sucker for abuse of alliteration. It's it's a lot. There is a lot of it. But I derive pleasure from it. I find it fun. Um, but yeah, hopefully this will be a different experience. As to whether I get around to, I don't see my Heaney copy. It's probably buried. I can see my Tolkien copy, my Tolkien iteration, which is like 3 times the length of this because it's like all footnotes and explanations. Um, it's I don't know whether I'll do another translation of it just to give you a different experience. Um, because frankly, life's too short, and I think you should go out and get copies of it on your own. This is just a taster, a sampling. I'm not a. I should not be the end all be all, uh, the sole arbiter of what you should listen to or read. But I've got some cool stuff, and I like to share some of that stuff, at least to whet your palate or or make your palate tingle. At any rate, that'll do it for me. So this week we still have another installment of Destination Void on Friday by Frank Herbert. So we've got that. Um, Otherwise, we're going to continue reading Armor by John Stakely, um, which is kind of like the flip side of the coin tonally of Starship Troopers, where instead of like yo oorah the Marines, it's more like oh god, war and violence kind of sucks. It's not fun. Um, Not that Starship Troopers is like war is awesome, but it's a lot more like not everybody in this process is competent, and we'll learn reasons for that later. As I recall, it's actually kind of light on background stuff, but we do get to a bunch of it. Anyway, there's yeah, it's good stuff. So yeah, the Beowulf will definitely be done within the month, no matter what. Um, we'll see how long that takes me to get through, because there's another short one if I can get to it that I'd like to before I have to go for 2 weeks. um, which is not poetry. Also kind of a downer. We'll see. It's called Termouche, and it's kind of about surviving the apocalypse, sort of. It's really interesting in that it dances around calling anything out. It's like it's clear that an apocalypse has happened, but it's not like you'll see. When we get there, you'll see. That one has a lengthy intro by Jeff Vandermeer, which I'm going to skip because it spoils half the book. So much the same thing as with this one. I kind of want people to go into it without those expectations, even if I do. Have foreknowledge because I've read it before. Anyway, I'm gonna go. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. If you are tuning into this after the fact, which is very likely, hi. The reason this is so rough is because I do it live. I do it live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, starting at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, or UTC -5. You can catch me live if you so choose at that point, or you can just listen to them after the fact. Hopefully that works for you too. Um, it works for me. I, whatever. As long as people are paying attention, so long as anyone who actually cares is deriving pleasure from it, then good. I have done my duty, as it were, if it is one. I don't get paid to do this. It is entirely a hobby, so it's not like I'll stop doing it if you don't tune in. So it's not a big deal. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. And otherwise, you know, I don't know what's going on. I'm losing the plot in a big way. My language centers are not doing what I want them to do. I'm trailing off. I feel like I'm part of a presidential debate. I promised I wasn't going to do that. I promised I wasn't, but I did anyway. Sorry. So yeah, stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. We'll get some nice cautionary tales in Beowulf about being decent to each other. And yeah, not getting greedy or being stingy or whatever. Alrighty, see you all later. Stay safe, stay sane, and I already did that. Cool. I have lost it. Goodbye.